We have an exceptional speaker this morning. I'll say a few more words about him here in a few moments. But I'd also draw your attention to the fact that we come together as industry, we come together as airmen, we come together as our international partners to ensure that there is a sound dialogue among all of us about air power. I would like to take a moment to recognize our international guests. If you would be kind enough to rise so that we can point out that we are pleased to welcome friends from our allies and our friends across the way. Now, we also regard our relationships with industry as very important, and I won't ask you to stand because we would all be standing at that point. And then we're also privileged to have several members of the media, including many international publications here with us this morning, and we're glad to have you here. Thank you. I learned of a new publication that I was told to go to Barnes & Noble, and I'll buy that. I also should remind you that September 19th through 21st is our flagship event of the year, and that, of course, is our airspace, and this year we're calling it Cyber Conference as well. And many of you will be there. If you're not already planning to be there, I would encourage you to be. We have been working very hard. Bridget Dongu has been working the agenda, and we have an array of speakers that I think you'd be very pleased with. More importantly, I think, is the associations that you can develop there. So for our industry partners, we hope to see you there, and for all of you, we hope to see you as attendees. Now, we're honored this morning to have with us General Weinstein, and of course he's the Deputy Chief of Staff for Strategic Deterrence and Nuclear Integration. Now, I won't indulge you with his entire biography, but I will tell you that he has served in such wonderful warm places like North Dakota, and he spent some time in Omaha, Nebraska, and I only know those things because I was privileged to do likewise in my active duty years. Now, General Weinstein is leading an incredibly complex set of nuances as we develop our national security strategy for nuclear systems. He has come into this role at a time that it has come to the forefront. Some of us yesterday evening were privileged to hear from the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and it was interesting to me that it was General Weinstein's role that was highlighted with respect to recapitalization and the things we need to do. So, General Weinstein, we would be pleased to have you join me on stage right now and deliver some remarks for our audience. Thank you, sir.
Well, Bernie, thank you. I am so glad you didn't go through my bio because it kind of highlights why my hair looks a little different now than it did even a few years ago. There's another group of people I would really like to recognize, Air Force cadets. Please stand up. These individuals are our future, and I was telling one of the cadets that I have one that works for me now that's been in the office since June. Individual has about another week left and has been absolutely a sterling performer. I wish I could keep him. The problem is he does have to graduate from college. He's on the 5-year program, so I had a long talk with his father about that one. It's a pleasure here to be chatting with members of industry, members of the press, members of our international partners, and I appreciate everyone for coming early this morning. And I'm really honored to talk about nuclear deterrence, and I look forward to your questions. But the basics, at the heart of each weapon system is our Air Force important element. I'll say the foundational element of our Air Force, and that is our airmen. We cannot do our mission without the dedication, determination, and drive our airmen give every day, and I cannot say enough to thank them adequately. I am grateful for the Air Force Association and others like it who help recognize their outstanding work in some very challenging environments. Yesterday at Barksdale Air Force Base, the high was 101 degrees with a heat index of 118. Last January in Minot, on a warm day, the lows were minus 17 degrees. And the airmen were on the flight line and in the missile field every single day. And the quality of our airmen is what makes our Air Force the best Air Force in the world. While I'm here to talk about nuclear deterrence, the breadth of capability the Air Force provides is much broader. Capabilities like space control and warning, cyber, global mobility and refueling, close air support, and intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance are just some key components of air power. Each capability is not only complementary, they are also building blocks that we rely upon to keep our nation safe. But these building blocks rest on top of a strong base, one that serves as foundation of our nation's defense. This foundation is the nuclear deterrent force. I'm sure you've already noticed an increase in discussion of our nuclear deterrent recently. The biggest discussion points are centered on the cost to modernize the nuclear enterprise. We'll get into some details later, but what I want to discuss up front is why we have a deterrent force to begin with. Let's go back about 100 years and examine the strategic landscape. Shortly after the turn of the century, the world became embroiled in a war the scale at which have never been seen. Places like Verdun, the Somme, Flanders Field, and Gallipoli became infamous for carnage of an unprecedented scale. All in all, over 16 million people were killed. Verdun and the Somme each saw casualty counts above 1 million people. Approximately 1.8% of the world's population died. Of course, it wasn't called World War I at the time, but in the aftermath, the level of devastation was recognized as so catastrophic that it became known as the Great War, or the war to end all wars. That, of course, was grossly optimistic, as we saw less than 20 years later, when places like Stalingrad, Luzon, Kursk, Tokyo, Dresden, the Ardennes, and Normandy also became synonymous with carnage. This time, though, humanity suffered losses that dwarfed World War I. 60 million people lost their lives in World War II. 45 million of these casualties were civilians. In total, 2.8% of the world's population was killed. 2.8. Those numbers are heart-wrenching. Our nation's most populous state is California. California has 39 million people. World War II erased as many civilians as currently live in California, Wyoming, Vermont, the District of Columbia, Alaska, North Dakota, South Dakota, Delaware, and Montana. Our current U.S. population is 323 million people. World War II would have erased 18% of the current population of the United States. With an estimated population of 140 million people in 1945, World War II would have erased over 42% of the entire 1945 U.S. population. Devastating, purely devastating. On a side note, airmen were critical to the success of the Allied victory during World War II, but the victory came at a huge cost to our airmen. The Europeans Theater 8th Air Force alone lost over 47,000 airmen, almost double the 24,000 Marines that were lost in all theaters during World War II. What has happened, what the world has experienced since the end of World War II? What I hope you remember is major powers have not fought each other in over 60 years. While any death in war is a tragedy, we have fought small, regional wars in places like Korea, Vietnam, Desert Storm, Bosnia, the global war on terror. Yet the percentage of the world's population impacted by these conflicts pales in comparison from the 20th century and the carnage that happened between World War I and World War II. I contend nuclear deterrence is a driving factor, if not the primary factor in this refrain from massive conflicts. With the end of World War II came the advent of the nuclear age. I like to think of the nuclear age in three parts. The first part is discovery. This time period lasted from 1945 to approximately 1960. This is where science and engineering developed, and we as a nation started our understanding of employing nuclear weapons. But it was not until the early 1960s that we established true strategy and policy. I use 1960 as a starting point because that's when we developed the first National Strategic Target List, which led to the first true operational war plan. It is with these developments of policy that the foundation of our nation's nuclear deterrence strategy is born. Additionally, 1960 saw the first major modernization effort of the nuclear enterprise. This effort produced the three legs of our triad. Each one of these legs has individual characteristics that enable flexible options for the President. The 1960s technology and modernization was followed up in the 1980s with modernization during the Reagan buildup. This was the last time we modernized our nuclear enterprise, the last time we made major investments in our national security. We effectively placed a pause on modernizing our nuclear enterprise. Some would state that after the fall of the Soviet Union and the start of the third phase, we didn't need to invest in nuclear deterrence. The threat was gone. The weapon systems would become a relic of the past. However, as we paused, other nations did not. I want to be really clear, this is not the Cold War. By the way, nuclear weapons were only one facet of the Cold War, but the Cold War was much more than nuclear weapons and very complex. But today's world is more complex and more uncertain. Instead of a bipolar world, it's a multipolar, proliferated world. Sustaining the capabilities to provide the President options is at the core of deterrence. Each leg challenges other nations to account for these capabilities. You must look at our capabilities through their lens. What did they see? What did they do? We need to remember our actions or inactions impact what others do. So, do we need a strategic bomber? Do we need a submarine-based platform? Do we need a long-range standoff weapon? Do we need a gravity bomb? Do we need a ground-based ICBM? And do we need command and control and infrastructure to support all legs of the triad? The answer to all these questions is a resounding yes. We need to remember that the only weapon that can change who we are and what we are, the only existential threat to our nation, is a nuclear weapon. We currently spend around 3% of the Department of Defense budget on the nuclear enterprise. At the peak of our modernization efforts in the mid-20s, that spending will go up to 7% of the entire DoD budget and then return to a normal level. When it comes to other nations, we want to deter them. We want to make the thought of launching a nuclear weapon so remote that through our strength, we keep our nation safe. Let's go back to World War I and World War II. There are 20 U.S. cemeteries, military cemeteries across Europe, spanning more than 1,000 acres. Buried in these 1,000 acres in places like Brittany, France, Cambridge, England, and Florence, Italy, are more than 100,000 Americans. We must never let this happen again. We must commit to the defense of our nation and our people and our allies. I think Bernard Brodie best captured the transformative effect of nuclear weapons when he said, "Thus far, the chief purpose of our military establishment has been to win wars. From now on, its chief purpose must be to avert them." Indeed, our nuclear deterrent is a deterrent in its purest form. It is essential to ensuring the U.S. and our allies are neither coerced nor attacked by other major powers. No one in this room knows what history will look like and what the future will hold. But the last 5,000 years has shown us that we will continue to face enemies and we will continue to face people that wish to do us harm. We must have a deterrent that is flexible so we can respond to the unexpected. In our current fiscal environment, we must make difficult decisions about our priorities. 21st century deterrence and assurance will demand persistent and focused efforts. Our investments are not simply in weapon systems, but also in the professional airmen conducting nuclear deterrence operations every single day. Nuclear deterrence must continue to provide the foundation of our national security strategy. I am glad we can have this dialogue in the United States. I guarantee you that you will not see the same types of discussions or this level of transparency in Moscow, Beijing, or Pyongyang. Thank God we have freedom and democracy here in the United States. That is why I'm proud to wear this uniform and serve our country every day. We continue to be the best Air Force in the world because of our airmen and their families serving alongside them. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
We'll let you answer from here. Ladies and gentlemen, General Weinstein has kindly agreed to take your questions. We have some microphones that we'd like to pass around so that everyone gets to hear the question when it is asked, and we would ask that you state who you are, what organization you represent, and then your question. And please limit follow-on questions. General Schott, sir.
Jack, thank you very much. Great talk, and appreciate mentioning our airmen. I wonder if you could take that one step further. How is the discipline of the crew force, bomber, missile, showing up in terms, because I think that's a great evidence of their morale. Will you take that on, please?
Yeah, I will. I will tell you that on the ICBM force, as you know, we had some issues back in the 2013, 2014 timeframe. Based on changes we made, I can honestly say, and this is based on empirical data, not just my gut feel, things are so much better now than they were in the past. Morale is so much higher. If you're going to tell somebody that they have a job of national importance, and you're going to tell someone that what they do impacts this nation every single day, you need to give them the responsibility. And when you take away that responsibility, that's been the problem. And what we did was we gave them the responsibility back. I also want to talk about the current generation. Every generation looks at the previous generation, and you can make comments about the previous generation. People made comments when I was a second lieutenant. They were probably true, but they made comments when I was a second lieutenant.
You're making that up, Jack.
Yeah. But I will tell you, when I work with the current generation, their strength is their honesty. If there is a problem, they tell you. So when you look at some of the issues and the way we kind of resolved some of the problems was we did something called FIP. I could use a fancy name, but it's more of the basic process is talk to the people doing the mission and find out what their problems are. And when you do that with a younger generation, they tell you exactly what the problems are. In my previous job, I never met a single second lieutenant or an airman who gave me a problem that was not 100% true. And that problem you're able to resolve. So when I look at the current generation serving this nation, this generation, just like previous generations, is the greatest generation. We call the World War II generation the greatest generation. I'm still blessed because my father is a B-29 guy. He's still alive, doing really well. But when you look at the current generation, almost everybody that's in uniform, really high percentage, I can get you the numbers, but over 90% of everyone that is serving today has come in during a time of war. So they've raised their hands to serve their country in a time of war. That just shows you the caliber of the people that are joining our Air Force, but also the other services. So to me, when I see what the morale is, it's really high. And it's high because we put responsibility where it belongs. I go back to a little bit of history. Imperial Japan and Nazi Germany were superpowers at the time. And we had first lieutenant squadron commanders. We had great leaders back then. We have tremendous leaders today. Thank you, General Schott.
Hi, Lee John Greco, Flight Global. I wanted to ask about the LRSO. I understand that there was another delay to Milestone A. I was wondering if you could tell me if that was still associated with the cost of the missile body, and if that's the case, what are the discussions or what are the capabilities that that body is going to have that this is still a protracted conversation at this point?
Well, let me give you the good news. The good news is in the FY17 President's budget, we have funding for LRSO. That's another good news story. If you look at the President's budget, and I want to get into the Prague agenda a little bit, if you look at the President's budget, all the President's budgets that he has sent forward as he's been the President has always supported nuclear modernization. So the money for LRSO, the money for GBSD, all our modernization programs are in the FY17 budget. What we're waiting for right now is Mr. Kendall to do the final dotting the I's and crossing the T's. And once the acquisition executive signs it, we'll be good to go. But right now, we are firmly committed to all our modernization programs, and there's money in the budget to do all of those.
Can you just confirm that, are those discussions still surrounded about that cost of the missile body? That was something that was mentioned a few months ago.
There's a lot of discussions going on the cost of the nuclear enterprise. I mean, you see a lot of articles on that. Bottom line, though, is the money's in the budget. We know there's a bow wave that we have to fix in the mid-20s time frame, When you look at where the modernization bow wave is going to go up to about 7% over time, that's not historically unreasonable. When you looked at how much money we spent in the 1960s for the nuclear deterrent force, it was much higher than 7%. At certain periods, it went up to 20%. When you look at the 1980s, it got up to about 10%. So when you look now at how much money we're spending in the out years, the money is not the main issue. So we're good with what's in the President's budget to support all our modernization programs.
Caroline Jock with the DC Silver Wings chapter. You talk a lot about our active duty members, and we're hugely thankful for them. What can you recommend for the upcoming civilian generation to support the nuclear task force?
Oh, that is a great question. When I say airmen, I mean everybody. So I probably need to be clearer. Because we can't do anything in the Air Force without active duty, reserve, guard, and our civilians. There's a lot of items that we're doing. We're doing a lot of reaching out. Because when I look at the complex just isn't the military. I need to talk about industry. Industry needs to attract really talented individuals that are really good in science, technology, engineering, and math. I need that as a military member for those people and those civilians that work for me, as well as what industry needs to generate and get those folks. So the amount of effort we're putting into by sending individuals to whether it's intermediate service school or senior service school are all there. We are working right now on a career path. Now that we've elevated my position to a 3-star, when you look at the way kind of the Pentagon's organized, I should have a 3-star deputy as a civilian. So right now we're building that career path to produce an SES-3 to be in the nuclear piece. And yesterday I shared it with a senior civilian and showed her all those AFSCs that kind of go into it. So let me just translate because I'm talking a lot of acronyms. When you look at all the career fields that it takes to do nuclear, we put that all into that pyramid so we can create that senior leader. When I talk about all those career fields, to become a senior civilian in the nuclear business, I need someone that knows policy. I need someone that knows strategy. I need someone that knows logistics. I need someone that knows acquisition. I need someone that knows engineering. So we built this career field that has all that in there in order to promote it. It also helps us when you look at Global Strike Command being elevated to a 4-star, when you look at where we have senior civilian positions around, there's an awful lot we're doing when it comes to the education piece, the professional development piece, and then building a career path that allows us to produce a senior civilian that can work in the nuclear business. So there's an awful lot of work going on. Sir.
Yeah, hi, James Drew from Aviation Week. Could I ask you, could you give us a rundown on your thoughts about the future of the dual-capable fighter bomber force that you have that's forward deployed with NATO? What's the future trajectory for those fighter aircraft that can also carry nuclear weapons? And will they someday be equipped to carry LRSO? And also maybe if you could give us an update on B-61-12 and its development.
So I just came back from Europe a few months ago. I will tell you that the commitment from NATO on maintaining dual-capable aircraft is as strong as it's ever been. So I don't see any future look of decreasing that capability. So that's point number one. Right now, when it comes to LRSO is being projected and looking at the B-2, the B-52, and the B-21 bomber, and that's where we're focused on LRSO. So when I look at the capability of the NATO dual-capable aircraft from our European allies, extremely supportive of that, and NATO is supportive of that commitment. And then when I look at LRSO and what we're projecting for LRSO is for the bomber force.
Hello, Lara Seligman with Aviation Week. Can you talk a little bit about specifically the F-35 and the integration of the B-61 potentially? And what signal does that send if you're putting nuclear weapons on the F-35? Are you worried about the perception going down the road, particularly with Russia, that you're perhaps lowering the threshold of nuclear weapons?
That is a great question, so let me answer it. I get the question a lot. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about it. We talk about I see the lowering the threshold, right? Because that's kind of a buzzword. The other buzzword I hear is, here, trigger alert for ICBMs. I need to be really clear. Using nuclear weapons is a decision made by the President of the United States, nobody else. So there is no lowering of thresholds when we talk about new weapon systems, period. It is a very clear command and control system, and the President is in charge of nuclear weapons. No one in the military is in charge of releasing nuclear weapons. When I look at lowering the threshold with F-35, F-35 is projected to be a dual-capable aircraft. That is in the upcoming software updates that we'll be doing for the F-35. So I don't see a potential use of an F-35 any different than having dual-capable aircraft now with the F-15E, the Strike Eagle, or the F-16. So I look at it as continued modernization of our force in order to work closely with our allies and protect our nation and our allies. It doesn't change the who authorizes use of nuclear weapons. I think it makes us a very strong country and makes the allies stronger by having a fighter force that we need for the future. I think it makes us stronger, which in turn, I think protects us, and hopefully it makes war less likely. War becomes more likely when you, from a position of weakness, not from a position of strength. When you're in a position of strength, it makes us much stronger. Ma'am?
Hi, sir. Courtney Albin with Inside the Air Force. I had a question on commonality between the SLBM and ICBM modernization programs. I know there's concern in Congress that they haven't seen details or timelines for when the Air Force and Navy are going to make decisions on that. And I just wondered what the Air Force is doing to make sure those decisions are made at the right point in the acquisition cycle, and how also some of those studies that you've done on commonality influence the GBSD acquisition strategy.
Thank you. So let me talk a little bit about commonality. Our main goal is to be able to deliver weapon systems on cost and on budget as cost effective as we can for the American taxpayer. So that's number one. When we look at commonality, commonality is a broad term. And I don't think we should narrowly look at commonality just as working with the United States Navy. So I work extremely closely with Admiral Benedict, and I consider Admiral Benedict a friend. And we talk about this frequently. Commonality also goes into what has already been developed with space systems, what has been developed for Missile Defense Agency, and then taking the best of breed. So the United States Air Force position is, of course, we want to work closely and we want commonality. And we want commonality based on competition and to produce the systems we need at the best possible cost. Now, when it comes to the request for proposal on GBSD, when that's released, you'll be able to read what's in there. And our whole focus is trying to get the best of breed, the best system at the lowest cost, and that's where commonality comes into help for the United States Air Force.
Just to follow up in terms of timing, when do you expect to make those decisions about commonality? Are they already?
They're already working really closely. The Air Force Nuclear Weapons Center, we did a study with SSP. That congressional report has been delivered to Congress that talks about commonality. And then we're in the discussions right now because the program office has written the RFP, and that request for proposal is with Mr. Kendall right now. So complete joint effort on working together, and also having the acquisition executive making sure that we're supporting what he believes we also need to do based on what his role is. But commonality is more than simply working with the Navy. Commonality is seeing what industry has out there as a whole. Sir.
Tony Capaccio with Bloomberg News. I want to go back to the cost issues. You kept saying 7% of the DoD budget. How does it translate into the percentage of the modernization budget? See, that seems to be the key issue. And second, the figure of $1 trillion gets thrown around a lot. Is that a fair number if you include 30 years of all the modernization DoD does, the Energy Department, command and control, and all the support involved. Is that a fair figure if you include all those caveats?
Okay, so I'm going to say yes, it is. So let me translate it a little bit differently. Well, I think this is, we use the word 1 trillion over the life cycle of a cost, and that is based on 7% of the budget, DoD budget. So 7% of the DoD budget, okay? Which means 93% of the budget must be like $1 gazillion. So everything has to be put into context. We talk about life cycle cost and what that costs over a life cycle. I'll have to get you the specifics, but the numbers has been floating around, the $1 trillion. I haven't seen anyone refute that $1 trillion over the life cycle of weapon systems. Some of these life cycle of weapon systems, we're projecting out to 2070, 2075. But if we're talking 7% of the budget, just think of what 93% of the budget then cost. So if we're talking about a foundational capability that keeps us safe, 7% of the budget at its peak does not seem like an outrageous amount of money.
But what about the competition within the modernization budget for F-35s and the non-nuke F-35s and all the conventional systems? What percentage of modernization?
We'd have to get that information for you. I don't have that off the top of my head, so I'm not just going to pull it out. Yeah. There is an issue with the budget. Okay, but let me be honest, there's always an issue with the budget. There's always an issue when you're modernizing, and you're modernizing a force on what that force costs and how you're going to do it over a lifetime. I mean, I just read a book on a previous president, and they were trying to get the defense budget to about $30 billion, and no one said, how can we get there? So this whole issue has to do with priorities. And once you make that decision on what the priority is, then you resource that priority. There's always trades we're going to have to do back and forth based on what capability we need. We can't forget either that the United States Air Force has been at war since 15 August 1990. When we went over to Desert Storm, we went over on 15 August 1990 roughly, and we've been over in the Middle East since 15 August 1990. That requires us to recapitalize a force, and that's the breadth of responsibility. Because when you look at what the Air Force provides, and that's why I wanted to open up that way in my talk, what the Air Force provides is a lot of capability for the joint force. It is remarkable that the last time a Marine or an Army person was attacked by the air was a long time ago, based on capability of the United States Air Force. We can't forget that. So across the breadth of responsibility, every capability we provide is needed for the joint force, and we have to modernize that capability.
We've got time for one more question.
Anyone that hasn't asked one yet?
Hi. Yeah, David Isby, Air International. Have recent events in Turkey raised any concerns with the forward-based systems, and also your response to the congressional uncertainty criticism about LRSO funding that was expressed in the recent debates in the Congress?
Congress is going to do what Congress does, and it's a beautiful system we have. Just like we get letters that do not support LRSO, we get letters from Congress that support it. So Congress will do what Congress does, and that's not my job. My job, and it's really Admiral Haney's, but the job is to tell Congress what we need as a military based on what you're asking us to do. That's the responsibility of the military. What Congress chooses to fund is their responsibility for Article 1 of the Constitution, because Congress raises armies and navies. The responsibility of people in uniform is to say what we need to do to keep this nation safe. So I'm good with what they do, and I'm good with what I do. When it comes to events in Turkey, Turkey's a key ally to the United States. It's a key ally to the war on ISIS. And right now, they're going through their issues that are all internal to their government, and we'll see how things flush out, but they're a key component of NATO, and they're a key component as on the fight against ISIS.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking General Weinstein for his wonderful comments. And sir, truly that was insightful. Now, our board of directors and our president has authorized me, in the spirit of your comments on nuclear modernization, to mint a special coin. We ordinarily give a challenge coin to our speakers, but I am pleased to present to you the first nuclear hardened challenge coin that we've had minted. So, sir, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, again, thank you for joining us here, and please join us literally if you're not a member of the Air Force Association. We would love to have you be a member. And again, I remind you, in September, the greatest event of the year in air power, and that's our Airspace and Cyber Conference at the Gaylord in September. So thank you for being with us. If you didn't, the most important announcement that will be made from this podium this morning is, if you don't have a card to get out of the parking deck, go see the nice people out here at the desk, and they'll provide one for you. Thank you for being here.